There are a lot of Christians on YouTube and in various websites attacking the concept of hypergrace and giving false witness about those who support it. Evidently, the church has given up preaching the good news and now contents itself with creating straw men, which it can self-righteously condemn. I am not an authority on the idea, but I will defend it. None of the opponents seem to have a valid explanation of what hypergrace supporters believe. The only credible claim, as far as I can tell, is that hypergrace people believe that God's grace is unconditional, like His love, and everlasting, like His love. Apparently, even the name hypergrace comes from the opponents of the concept. The prefix hyper means over or above, as in you have gone over the limit or you have gone above the maximum. This indicates that the mainstream churches believe there are limits to God's grace, that there is a maximum that He is willing to provide, and when you have used your limit, next stop hell. How many times did Jesus say we are to forgive? Yet God has a limit? I don't think so. These people are guilty of making God like man, which is another way of saying they are making themselves like God. This happens when you don't have the correct foundation for your beliefs, against which you can measure doctrine for its authenticity. Their fundamental belief about God is that He is a capricious being full of the foibles, prejudices, and conceits that plague mankind. Not true. Is God simply a larger-than-life version of ourselves? No. This idea comes straight from the heathen mythologies of Greece and Rome, which were the delight of Constantine, who was the delight of the 4th century church sycophants. Everything that Jesus taught starts with love. Anything that goes against this principle is not from God, period. No exceptions, no special pleadings, no higher understanding. If it does not start, continue, and finish with love, it is from man, not God. I do not understand people who would believe in a God who is no better than they are, who in fact is worse than some people. The average person doesn't have a milliportion of the mercurial fluctuations in temperament that the Church of Constantine ascribes to the God of love. For God so loved the world, remember? Period. Exclamation point. God is not a referee who is here to judge us on our performance and penalize us when we commit a foul. God created us out of love. We were good in His sight, but then we got separated, and He wanted desperately to return us to His fold. Jesus gave Himself as the ransom so that we could be reunited with God. The history of God is not one of a taskmaster looking for any little excuse to refuse His grace from the unworthy. It is the story of a loving Father who despaired over the loss of His children and rejoiced exceedingly when they all were returned. Conclusion. Those who try to limit God's grace do so because they think that man's sin is so overwhelming to God that He can't let it go unpunished. They believe that man's sin somehow diminishes God if it is not punished. Yet God has shown throughout history that it is not the sin but the separation that He is mostly concerned about. If He were hyper-concerned about the acts of sin, then why would He make an adulterous murderer like King David the focal point of His plan of redemption? All God has ever cared about is reuniting Himself with us. Jesus did that. Let us be thankful.